What is up, guys, and welcome back. Today with me is Morton, the lead designer of Global War 1936 versions 3 and now 4. Say hello, Morton.
Greetings.
Today we're going to be doing something similar to what Global War 36 enthusiasts and Morton have been doing. We're going to talk a little bit about version 4 and some of the rule changes that we like. Today is going to be all about the naval units. So Morton, to start off here, you want to tell us a little bit about your process and how things changed a little bit for this version?
Sure. Well, as you all know, in version 3, there was a lot of new components added, a lot of new units, a lot of new ships. So for version 4, what we did is we actually we looked at each ship one by one to see what do we need the ship. How can we improve it? Is there something that needs to be tweaked? The process was we actually ripped most of the ships out of the game and then added them in one by one via playtesting. So we played a lot of games and figured out, hey, we need this unit in the game because it serves a purpose. So I can tell you now that all naval units in version 4 is in the game because they serve a purpose. And it's always it's a fine balance because some people want more units, some people want less units, and no matter what we do or decide, we can't make everyone happy.
That's true.
But I think that the current setup with the current units, they work well. So I hope that you guys think the same.
I agree at first glance because we're starting to get a lot more, diversity in the naval units. In version 3, they were a little bit more vanilla, just kind of attack, defense, move, maybe some shore bombardment, and then destroyers and subs had their own little thing. But you can tell in this version that every single unit has its own purpose, and there's some new mechanics in there. We've got the target select on the light cruisers. The battle cruisers obviously are way different. So I can already tell that there's a lot more diversity, and the naval units are going to be really fun in this game. So I'm looking forward to it.
One small anecdote perhaps is that I can share that no one knows about is the coastal defense ships and the torpedo boat destroyers. They may seem awkward. I mean, why are they in the game?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they can't be bought. And so why not just replace them with heavy cruisers and destroyers and then save some units, save some complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually did this. And to be honest, I thought it was a good idea. But the problem was that Great Britain, when they aligned all the neutrals, they got so many destroyers and heavy cruisers for free that they never bought anyone. So it was simply, we needed the obsolete units so that when the neutrals aligned to Great Britain, they wouldn't get first-class units for free.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. And I think the torpedo boat destroyers and coastal subs and coastal defense ships also serve a pretty important historical place in the game too, because they're World War I beaters that people aren't really going to use. And so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, what does a destroyer represent? What does a light cruiser represent?
Mm-hmm.
All different nations had more or less, they didn't agree on what exactly a destroyer was. So there was a whole range of units, and we combine multiple types, so to speak, in one unit in the game. Otherwise, we will be overflowing with different weird units.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a fine line to walk.
So if you're a naval warfare enthusiast, I'm pretty sure you can find some issues with how units are represented.
Mm-hmm.
But it's again gameplay triumphs over realism any day.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. It's a gameplay design philosophy. So let's start off with our battle cruisers here. I think they got the the biggest change in terms of a single naval unit. And it seems that you kind of designed them after the pocket battleships that the Germans utilized a little bit there at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about how these came about?
At the beginning, we were looking for do battle cruisers, do they belong in the game or not? And then we had the idea of, wait a minute, pocket battleships are not represented in the game. What version 3 has, or had, was surface warships were able to do convoying.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say that was a very, very poor representation of pocket battleships in version 3. It was rarely used because of mine warfare. You didn't get a modifier and stuff like that. So
mm-hmm.
it didn't really work well. And if you look at from a unit perspective, a battle cruiser and a pocket battleship are quite similar in size and armament. So
mm-hmm.
we took the liberty of combining the two, and then we tried it out with the notion of, can we actually get this mechanic to work, both so that it's worthwhile for convoying, but also can we make especially the Commonwealth player split his naval units up in smaller task forces.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a big problem in the earlier versions that you just combine these massive fleets and see, and then look at your opponent's massive fleet next to your own fleet, and then duke it out for one decisive battle. So we really want to get this, how can we split the fleets up? And the battle cruisers are a good way of forcing the British to hunt them down. And the way we made the modifiers is so that you actually preferably need some sort of aircraft carrier mm-hmm. along some other ships to protect it, to hunt the battle cruiser down.
Yeah, because those aircraft give you a huge boost there with the +4. And the big thing that I noticed that the battle cruisers are now 7.7 instead of 6.6 to purchase, so 2 extra IPPs in there. So they're a little bit more expensive. And with those battle cruiser die rolls, they seem to be a pretty expensive gamble running around out there in the Atlantic or Pacific, because the Japanese start with 1. Do you see a lot of these getting bought, at least with your play group now?
So Germany starts with 1,
mm-hmm.
and I could easily see Germany buying another one, depending on how much you want to actually go and then fight in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the modifiers are designed is that it's actually, when radar is developed by the British, the return of investment for these battle cruisers, they tend to diminish.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an early game mechanic.
And it seems like it could be a good idea to build maybe 1 or 2 extra just to pretty much force the British to use that tech roll on radar instead of having them get something else.
And the good thing is that you can actually use the battle cruiser as a normal, very good unit.
Absolutely. So they're still great units.
When radar is developed, or there are too many aircrafts in the Atlantic, well, you can then switch and then, well, let's go for an invasion of some sort,
mm-hmm.
and then use the battle cruisers.
They've still got the shore bombard at 3, which is a decent little first strike shot there.
Yeah.
And they also count as a militia while in port. That's one of my favorite new mechanics that you added, was the militia while the little the crew is defending the port. I just think that's a great little touch.
Yeah, we had to add that to make the import rules work.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, the whole mechanic will fall apart. So yeah, battle cruisers are also in the good category
mm-hmm.
for militia.
So next, let's talk about the subs, which saw it's not a huge change, I don't think, but it's a very important one. Obviously their biggest change is that they only defend for 1 round now, and they don't block movement while on defense, which is huge. I was obviously very guilty of abusing the submarines block movement in version 3. I know I did it on multiple occasions in Skyhook while I was playing as the U.S. I used a coastal sub to just protect Alaska, and then set up a picket with my subs pretty much all around the Japanese islands. So it's a big, really, really important change, because that was pretty cheesy. I'll admit it myself.
Well, I mean, you're a good player, and I do.
Thank you.
I have to confess that I have been watching some of your YouTube wars, and when good players do cheesy things, it's my job to listen,
Mm-hmm.
and I can get mad at you for being cheesy, or I can say, wait a minute, what is there a problem here with the rules? And with submarines and many other instances, there was a problem with the rules. So actually, submarine has changed quite a bit overall in some of the play tests that we have done. They tended to be used a lot as fodder.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's not how I want people to use submarines. So a lot of the changes for this version has actually been to reduce the effectiveness of submarines as fodder. And one simple thing is that has a huge impact is that submarines don't get a movement bonus from ports now or shipyards. They only get movement bonus from submarine bases.
Yeah, and they also can only go and port into submarine bases as well.
Yes. So when your fleet is moving 4, your submarines are only moving 3, so they can't keep up with the fast ships, and that means that their ability to act as fodder has been vastly reduced. And then, of course, the change where defending submarines can only participate in one round, and that's also for simplicity's sake. I mean, in version 3, submarines rules were the most difficult ones to understand, and I mean, I sometimes have difficulty explaining them to people.
Yeah.
If I have difficulty explaining something, then there's a problem, because I mean, if I can explain it, I mean, who can, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Absolutely. I think it's a great change, and I'm excited to see it in action. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the light cruisers, who got a change that I love, and I was a big advocate for, which is adding a little bit of flak to some cruisers. So they get the target select at 1 to 3 versus aircraft. Now my next idea is to add torpedoes to cruisers so that they get target select against ships, and that the U.S. can only buy them in July of 1943. That's a joke. You don't actually have to do that. But so this is a cool change, because we didn't have a lot of unique abilities in the cruisers. You know, they were pretty just 1, 2, 3, light, heavy battle cruiser, one step up on each. So this is a good change. Also, the other big change is that they're built in one turn now. So 9 IPPs, one more than usual, but you get less of a discount when you get improved construction as well, which is a big change.
In version 3, it was the most broken unit.
I was also guilty of that.
Yeah, yep, I've seen that. You utilize it very effectively, and yeah, and it's yeah. Of course, we had to do something about it. We actually played a long time with no light cruisers in the game. That also worked well, but we added them back in and gave them the anti-aircraft target selection, because we felt that there was room for another cruiser with AA capabilities. But if you look at the naval units, my philosophy is that I want the same price across all stages. I don't want a unit that is 443 in purchase, because that's impossible to remember.
Yeah, I agree.
And that was actually some units had that in version 2, I think. And then there's a difference between, the Japanese could buy cheap destroyers compared to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you switched nations, you had to start from scratch every time. So I want the same prices across all phases. And if you look at all the units we have in the game now and look at the price, we actually completely filled out all the options, because you can't have a better ship that has the same price as another ship,
Mm-hmm.
but it's better, because then who will ever buy the poor ship, right?
Right.
So we actually, with that philosophy in mind, we were actually at the limit of how many ships we can have in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we have to differentiate, and that just slows the game down.
An interesting thing that I noticed is that if you do happen to go the improved construction route, then your heavy cruisers will end up costing 8 and your light cruisers will cost 8. Obviously, there's a difference in the 1 turn versus 2 turns, which people tend to prefer the 2 turn route. I'm kind of on the fence with that. I'm not sure with between the, get your ships now versus a little bit cheaper for 1 turn extra. It just kind of depends on the situation. But that is, again, one of those choices that you've created between, which unit do you want the power and the shore bombardment of the cruisers or the heavy cruisers, or do you want the flak of the light cruisers in there? So that's a very interesting choice, and one that I'm excited to stress about.
And you will actually find that the AA excitement, or at least that's what I see in my play groups.
Uh-huh.
Every time you roll an AA, the guy or the player with the aircraft is like,
Mm-hmm.
no.
I'm scared.
And you have the same
one anti-aircraft gun.
and you have the same thing here with the light cruisers, because aircraft are king of the seas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you have the option of, please don't hit a 2 now. So, and we want that excitement in the game, because that adds a lot of fun. So light cruisers also have that.
That's great.
But on the flip side, they don't provide a militia to the import,
Uh-huh.
and you can't shore bombard as well. So it is a dilemma.
All right, let's move on to, we're actually going to talk about seaplanes for a little bit, which isn't, they're a plane, but I kind of consider them a naval unit because that's, the only place they can be effective. They got some pretty excellent buffs here. A unit that wasn't purchased very often in V3, you saw them sometimes. But obviously now if you pair them up with some text, then they become excellent. That +2 attack on map with anti-sub warfare is honestly a huge buff to anti-sub warfare too, because I found myself usually choosing radar over ASW. So that's awesome. Like if you're the British and you can get that and kind of get it going, that could be really deadly, especially against those advanced subs that are notoriously difficult to kill. So can you talk about some of these changes for the seaplanes?
Yeah, sure. So seaplanes, I think it seems like it's everyone's favorite units to hate. I've gotten a lot of comments, a lot of feedback about seaplanes. So again, we went back to basics. Do we want seaplanes in the game or not? I'm not particularly satisfied with how they were implemented in version 3. Like you said, they were hardly used. But I mean, seaplanes, they had a big role to play in the war. So it's one of these niche units that is, I think, belongs in global war.
Uh-huh. I agree.
So what we did was we actually tried a lot of different things. So we tried a lot of things that didn't work. For example, we tried that seaplanes could hit all types of ships, and that just made them number one unit to buy because they had a incredibly long range. They were cheap.
Yeah.
So here you go. We now introduced the perfect cannon fodder.
Mm-hmm.
So that broke everything. So that had to go. And we also wanted seaplane bases. They should also play a role. So again, we seaplanes do not get movement bonus from normal ports. So you have to have a seaplane base. And then we added tech, long range tech to the mix to get extra map range.
Yeah, map of 3 is crazy.
It is
that's
very
really
good.
far.
But the seaplanes are not. They are somewhat. They have a fairly low attack values. So
hard to hit 3s.
Ideally, you want to pair with a destroyer if you want to have a good chance at hitting the submarine. But if you have to look at seaplanes along with submarines. You can't look at seaplanes on their own because the way that submerging works for submarines has also changed a bit. So let's say that you have a submarine, I have a seaplane. I fly out and attack you. I don't hit. You have to submerge now. And that means that in my non-combat movement, I can actually pass you. You don't get to fire. So when submarines are submerged, they're actually not a problem for anyone. So you can strategic nailman movement above them. You can pass narrow crossings. You can do anything. They're effectively out of the game. So I haven't killed your submarine, but I have suppressed it for the rest of the round. So that has a very, very big impact on a lot of things because you're able, as the attacker, to choose the order of combats. So let's say that I choose to resolve the combat with the submarines. I miss. You are submerged. Then I could just move my big fleet across through the sea zones, and you don't get to fire because you are submerged. So there's a lot of, and that's the bit on the tactical level. So that is now included as well, due to the way that submarines and submerging works.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And seaplanes are the perfect weapon for suppressing submarines because they're cheap. They have long map range, especially if you have a base and long-range aircraft. So it actually works quite well.
And then every once in a while you'll get lucky and maybe snipe one. Yeah, that's great. That's something that I hadn't thought about until you just mentioned it. So.
And there are always players who either are forgetting or just cocky and say and forget their naval transports. So they're just sitting there alone.
And with the move of
seaplanes, they love alone. They love lonely naval transports.
They just
so
have
we've
so
seen a
much
lot
range,
of and we've seen a lot of that. Actually, also in port, where you have a lone transport, you go in port and think you're safe, but then the seaplane comes along and takes a stab at you. Yeah, I actually think that seaplanes don't deserve all the hate that people are giving them. I think they're a good niche unit. Of course, do you want to buy them as the Russians? Probably not. Well, actually, Russia also has a use for them because they can actually hit the German North Sea convoy line from Murmansk. Yeah,
we haven't even talked about the seaplanes ratings.
So there's actually a lot of usage for it. I hope that people will, they will embrace them.
Well, shoot, man, you've convinced me. I'm Team Seaplane now.